Good. So we have spoken about preprocessors and the CSS basics. Now let's go and talk about the CSX box model. So this again was generated with Copilot plus Cloud Sonnet, with exception of some images like this one in here that I added. And then what we want to talk in here is a little bit about how CSS and HTML uses to distribute and lay out things on the screen. So one thing that is critical for you to understand is this whole concept of the box model, which takes each one of the elements that you're going to have in your page and then divides it into multiple parts of it. So you have on one hand the actual content, like the text and the images, which in this image will be kind of like the blue part in there. And then you have a padding, which is the green one, and then this yellow one, which is going to be the border, and finally like a margin. And on top of that, you can place all of that with a position, which is this. This image, I think I got it just straight from the developer tools in Chrome. So remember, if you just inspect in here, it's kind of interesting because you should be able, let me see if it's, there we go. Like this is the specific box model for that specific element that we are seeing in there. Again, as I told you, I'm using like a specific library that it's called Reveal to show the slide. So that's why it's a little bit complicated. But you can use that just for controlling how things looks on the screen and things like that. Now, there are two versions of the box model, the standard box model, in which the width and the height of the element is the content area only. So whenever you go and define something like the width and the height, that is going to be aligned to the content. And then if you put a padding and then a border and a margin, the total width that is going to be used by that element is going to be the 300 plus the 20 plus the 5 plus the 10, if I'm not mistaken, and taking into account that you have 20 on the left, 20 on the right, and that's why you have those elements. Actually, it's not really including the final margin. Okay, so that is for the regular standard box model. But if you go into the alternative box model, and you can do that just by applying this attribute box sizing, which is border box, then that is going to give you that the total width is going to be appending the padding and the border. Okay, so it is important that you keep that in mind. So in this case, that clarification, the margin is not really included. So this 10px is what was being computed in here. I think I misread that before. Okay, now a good practice that comes from the materials is that if you're going to be applying the box sizing, it is a good idea to apply it to all of the elements in your page. Make sure to make that decision. And if I were you, I will actually add an extra note in there. So anyone that is reviewing that code knows that the width is not, it's actually including the padding and the border. Okay, so the other thing that is very important for you to know is that there is an attribute called display. And display can be, usually there are multiple options, but the most common ones that you can use is the block or the inline elements. And this is especially useful for you to understand how things are going to be distributed in the page. So when you go and see a page like this, um, every time we have an element, like for instance, let's go and inspect this one in here, that it's, oh, I jumped, so let me go and do it again. So when I do that, here it is. This is the H3, and then let me actually go and see if I can break this. So usually, like for instance, an H element, it's a block element, okay? But then if you go and switch this one to say that it's, for instance, an inline block, and let me see if I actually take this one that usually normally is a display block, and I also say that is going to be an inline block. This is what I really like doing on HTML. Then you can now notice that the header is now not breaking, but instead is just like floating around. So that is the main characteristic of what that inline versus block do, is that they will not be breaking into new lines and they will be trying to stack together. It will still try to respect the width, the height, and all of the other elements from the box model. And that is for the block elements, and in the inline elements is going to stay in the same line and ignore the width and the height, and we're only going to be using the horizontal padding and element. So as I just showed you in the example, You do it with something like this, and then this button is actually going to stay next. So if, for instance, you want to put a bunch of buttons one after the other, then you can do it with elements like this, okay?